perception's not always everything. I think you always need to have a backup plan.
We've been in a long period of a good time, good economic times. You and I are both old enough. Our parents are old enough. They come from different countries, right? My parents immigrated here from Portugal. It was a poor country. They saw bad times. Your parents from China, they saw bad times. So when they came here with those scars. Those scars that for many people today, after operating for 20, 25 years of good times, those scars are either non-existent or they're buried very deep and forgotten. And so that's one of the things, us talking about this, part of the value we want to bring forward is, we have to use and leverage these good times for future bad times.
Failures breed success, right?
That's right. Yes, sir.
I'm Garrett Wong, and this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you? Tony, thanks for being on my podcast today.
Garrett, thanks for having me on. This is going to be a great experience. For us, we're going to have a lot of fun, but I think the viewers and the listeners are going to have a lot of fun. And, for the viewers and the listeners, if you haven't hit the subscribe button for Garrett's channel, please do. He doesn't make any money doing this. I don't make any money doing this. We do it for value for the listeners. So that's all we ask for is hit that subscribe button. Garrett does a great job here for us. So appreciate it if you could do that for him.
Thank you, Tony. Well, took the words right out of my mouth. I don't actually normally ask for subscribers and stuff like that. I hope that people get enough value, but appreciate the call out. No, I think Tony and I are here. We're both podcasters. We're both in real estate, and there's a lot of value, like Tony said, audience, that we're all going to get out of this. So let's back up as I like to do. Tony, why don't you give the audience a little bit of a background about yourself?
Sure. I think anybody that knows me is, I'm a very relatable guy. I'm not, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I came from a very, very middle class family, blue collar workers. And so for me, I was handed down the tablets from my parents, who were immigrants to this country, to this great country. I was handed down the tablets of go to school, get a great job, go to school, get a good education, get a great job, and you'll be taken care of forever. And so that's what I did. I did that, got a great education, couple of great degrees. But at the end of the day, I found myself in a situation where I did need to transition to real estate to really provide the freedoms that I wanted in my life. So I basically went from, pretty much blue collar family to today having over 400 rental properties. And I share that, none of this is a braggadocious thing, as you know, Garrett. It's really to show people that, hey, you can be just an average person out there, plugging along at your job, your W-2, that's great. But there is more that can be achieved. Real estate, as we know, this isn't an overnight success story. It takes time. For me, it took me 10 years to get from, my first real estate deal to actually retiring from the corporate environment, retiring at the ripe old age of 44. So it is possible, but it took me 10 years to do that. So as long as folks calibrate to that, real estate is a bit of a journey. There's wins and there's losses along the way. There are for all of us. Calibrate to that, and you'll be fine, right? So that's a little bit of my background, just as a teaser, and we can go anywhere from there.
Yeah, no, I'd like to definitely dig into that. It's very fascinating to me. Like I come from half of an immigrant background here. Well, actually, full, I guess. My dad came here from China when he was 8 years old. Um, it's interesting to me the values, and they're good values, but it's that story, right?
Mhm.
Of get a good job, get an education. You know, it's funny you say blue collar, white collar, and I kind of cringe. My mother uses that all the time, and it's like, what does that mean? Well, where what blue collar? You're wearing what overalls, and you're doing a dirty job, and white collar. What is that? Like a lawyer or a doctor? And what I find fascinating now is the quote unquote blue collar people are, they're making more money and they're the business people and more successful than the so-called white collars. So I always say, Mom, you can't use that anymore, right? So but Tony, you talk about passing those tablets down. I love that analogy too. I just think of these big stone tablets of this is the family creed. Let's talk about more about that. Like you bought into it as I did, right? The education, the school, the job. What kind of job was it?
So I graduated with 2 degrees, with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. So a very very sought after degree, and then I also had an MBA. So I landed
Very
at a
nice.
defense contractor. So I was a civilian working at a defense contractor, building all sorts of defense related items. And that worked well for about 20 years. I then jumped to telecommunications, just to see a different industry, a different part of things, which was great. But with that, after being in the corporate environment for about 19 years, without notice, I got handed a layoff slip, which I was unprepared for, as you can imagine, Garrett. And I think a lot of people are, right? I think there's a lot of people, and this is where it's relatable today. We're seeing more and more in the headlines that companies are laying off some amount of staff. It could be, 50 people. It could be 5,000 people, right? There's layoffs going on right now. They don't get a lot of visibility in the news. It's kind of been dwarfed by the campaign here in the U.S. We just went through this election season, and so it's kind of been dwarfed by that. But if you do, a couple of Google searches, you'll see that there's been some layoffs of some significance, and people may be, uh, unfortunately, blind to some of that activity. And hopefully, it doesn't happen. But it happened to me. I was blindsided. I wasn't paying attention to things, and I got handed that pink slip, as we say here in the states, that layoff slip, and I wasn't prepared for it. I was caught very flat-footed. I thought, like we've been talking about, I had the right degrees. Um, it's just market conditions turned on us, and so I was left in that situation where I wasn't financially independent at the time, right? And that's part of the awakening. That's part of the awakening to realize, wait a minute, what do I do now? I have to go do something else. I have to go find another job. And so, this layoff was a big catalyst for me.
They talk about job stability, right? Get the job, the silver watch. You've been at the company, you're looking at the pension. And I'm sorry, but it's a bit of smoke and mirrors, right? Golden handcuffs. I've heard that term too, but yeah, I don't think there's any job security. People look at myself and probably yourself as entrepreneurs and go, "Oh man, it could fall apart at any time." Yeah, it could. I mean, hopefully we're making the right moves, but we have the control and hopefully with good business practice of foresight instead of being somebody's reactionary number that they're just cutting because they're cutting. Doesn't matter how hard of a worker you were. So I don't think there's true stability in that narrative anymore.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So when you had this epiphany, then when did real estate start poking its head into the narrative?
So I was very fortunate at a young age to have some exposure to real estate, through my immigrant parents, right? I mean, kind of going back to that time when folks came here to this country, nothing was given to them like it is today, or more so today. A lot of entitlements and a lot of free stuff given to immigrants today. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just drawing the comparison. Back then, my parents, came to this country. They had to live with a friend or family member until they got on their feet, until they got some jobs and some money, to support themselves. But you know, they at one point purchased a 6 unit multifamily to be able to have some additional cash flow. Because even for them, as blue collar workers, my dad was a construction worker. My mom worked in a mill in a factory. So for those blue collar workers, it was almost like seasonal work. Construction workers did not work in the wintertime. They were laid off. And then also, depending on the contracts through the factory, my mother would occasionally get laid off as well. So they had to have something else, a second source of income. And for them, it was this 6 unit multifamily property. And so there's, you know, going back to where we are today on how we're calibrated to go to school, get that job. We're just laser focused on that one thing, one job, one source of income. And I think that's a mistake today. I think we need to go back to conditioning our young people to look at multiple sources of income, to be able to help them get through the tough times. Because right now we've been in good times. It's been 15 years of really good times, but the bad times will come, and we need to be prepared for that. So as far as like learning those things from my parents and hearing what they went through and having real estate to help them, that was the big awakening for me to say, "Oh, I just got laid off. Maybe I should have had some real estate to help me through this tough time of being laid off." Unfortunately, I didn't. So, I wasn't financially independent. As I said, I had to go off and get another job, which, okay, I did that, but shortly thereafter, I purchased my first multifamily. It was a 4 unit building, Class C property, not a beautiful building, but definitely something that cash flowed and would provide some level of a secondary income for me in perpetuity, which is very awesome. That you can't necessarily say with a job you're going to have that paycheck in perpetuity, but with this multifamily, I could say with very strong conviction and probability that's going to be in perpetuity. So that was my initial exposure to real estate growing up with my family, seeing the benefit. And then my first deal, after being laid off, a couple of years after being laid off, being able to pull that down payment together to purchase it. And oh, by the way, I still own that very first
Really?
multifamily today. Yes, sir.
Well, Tony, they always say you never forget your first, right? So, first love. No, I can remember my first as well. I was just putting it on X yesterday. It's interesting because my family, being immigrants, I actually didn't even know my dad was involved in real estate, if you can believe it. I'm like a 10, 11-year-old riding my bike here in Winnipeg, Canada, and my family bought back into I guess, a Chinese restaurant that was kind of so I guess I have to tell this story, even though you're my guest on the podcast, but now my listeners. So my there was a Chinese restaurant on my mom's side of my family. My grandfather, so on my mom's father, passed away, and sort of that side of the business kind of went off with an aunt and the other business partners, and it came full circle with my own father back in the early '80s. Um, and then he bought into the restaurant business, so it kind of came back into our family, even though it was a 50-year business. And there was, I guess, a dispute, and they had to move, and they moved into this commercial building. Okay, fine. And yet, that was when I heard that my dad had these two C class duplexes, and he'd had them for a while, and he liquidated those to buy this commercial building. And I'm like, what? And I didn't hear about that until like years later because I was like 11 or 12. I actually didn't hear about that until I was in my 20s, disenchanted with my own education and looking for different things of what kind of businesses am I going to run. And then here I hear this story. I get in touch with my dad's old real estate agent, and he kind of mentored me. And that's where I ended up buying my very first property. I mean, the power of real estate, right? So it's very interesting, our
Yeah, yeah.
parallels there.
There's so much there, aside from the cash flow and, being able to provide that secondary income stream, as you mentioned there with your father, being able to provide that opportunity, right? Which we don't educate folks enough on that word opportunity and creating opportunities for themselves. That's a huge thing we need to be doing going into the future here with our next generation, right? For your dad, the opportunity it provided for him to roll those two duplexes into a larger commercial investment. Had he never bought those, had he never taken the risk, had he never, gone through the motions, he would have never had that opportunity. It wouldn't have been on the table for him to take.
100%. And I'm sure, you know, People looking at my dad, "Oh, Bill's out there again, collecting rent," on Magnus Avenue in the North End, which is like our C class area here. Like it's bad now. It was even worse back then, right? Dangerous, going in, having to take a baseball bat or whatever. Like he was doing all of this. I'm sure his friends and family were like, "You're crazy." And yet it still doesn't matter if it's C class or not, or not even cash flowing. The tenant is still paying that mortgage. It's still an income producing, equity producing property. And he was able to do that. So, perception's not always everything. I think you always need to have a backup plan.
Yeah, and again, I just I want to reinforce the, you know, we've been in a long period of a good time, good economic times. You and I are both old enough. Our parents are old enough. They come from different countries, right? Even our
Yep.
parents. My parents immigrated here from Portugal. It was a poor country. They saw bad times. Your parents, from China, they saw bad times. So when they came here with those scars. Those
Yeah.
scars that for many people today, after operating for 20, 25 years of good times, those scars are either non-existent or they're buried very deep, and forgotten. And so that's one of the things, us talking about this, it's part of the value we want to bring forward is, we have to use and leverage these good times for future bad times to protect our.
Failures breed success, right?
That's right. Yes, sir.
Anybody who has gone into real estate in the last 10 years probably doesn't have too many scars, right? Other than saying, "Oh, I wish I could have gone into it 20 years ago." But those who made it through 2007, 2008, and when I say made it through, I don't mean, "Hey, I'm going to get into real estate in 2007 and 8 because there's an opportunity here." I'm like the people who had significant holdings were told by the banks, "Oh, we're not covering your mortgage anymore. You're upside down, you're whatever," and had to grind, liquidate, do whatever it took to try to save their portfolios and their long-term family generational wealth. Those are scars. Those are the people now that can look back and say, "I made it through that. I'm never going to go through that again because I'm putting different pieces in place right now." Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the folks we should be, so to speak, listening to and having mentor us, because they come with that hindsight of experience, really, to be able to mentor us and say to us, "Have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? Is it cash flowing well enough? Or if it's a value add play, do you have enough in reserves to cover yourself?" Right? They'll come with all these different perspectives that they may have scars, and let's leverage that. Right. The one thing I love about real estate, there's a lot of things I love about real estate, but I love the community.
Yeah.
I go to real estate conferences. I'm sure you do, and some of your listeners go. We'll all say the same thing. You go to real estate conferences, everybody's talking about whether they did a deal or lost a deal or have a problem. Everybody's trying to help each other solve a problem, right? How did you close? How did you get the financing for that? Well, call this person or call that person, or
Yeah.
how are you making it cash flow? Well, I bring 50% of the 50% of the equity to the deal, or and I get it to cash flow that way. Yes, it's no longer a 20/80 situation. I need to bring half, not just 20%, right? So we bring all these things, and we're all working together as a community to help each other solve problems, right?
Yeah, I don't see too many people that are like, "Oh, I'm not that's IP, intellectual property. I'm not gonna do that because you're gonna get ahead of me." They all share. They're
Right.
very selfless with the knowledge.
Like I said, I come from the defense industry, and it doesn't matter if you come from defense industry or you come from, say, the pharmaceutical industry. If there's a conference, like a pharmaceutical conference that's being held, which I know nothing of, I never worked in pharmaceutics, but if there's a conference, I can almost guarantee nobody is going to be sharing information like that to be able to help the next company achieve something more, higher, more sales, better marketing, whatever it is above your company. Nobody's going to be sharing that IP like you're talking. Nobody is sharing that. But real estate is so different. It's such a great community. I see it on social media all the time. I'm sure you do as well. People
Yes.
trying to help each other be successful and achieve more in their lives.
Yeah, landlord questions, whatever it is, nobody's saying sign this NDA so we can have a conversation, right?
Exactly.
So, you wrote a book.
Yes,
I
sir.
want to talk about that for a few minutes. Tell us about the book, and then I want to really dive into the concepts because I find it fascinating what you're talking about.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Garrett. So the book is called Freedom at Risk: How to Protect Your Personal and Financial Freedom. And I'll share with your audience, your guests. If somebody wants a free copy of the book, just send me an email, put in the subject line book, and then send me your address so I can send it off to you. The goal here again is just to get more information out there and help people. And if I can do that by sending you a free book, I'd love to do it. Um, so really the essence of the book, you know, it started probably about 5 years ago. It took me about 4 years to go ahead and do all the research and compile the book. And originally, the book wasn't even supposed to be a book. So a little bit behind the scenes was I I knew that I don't have any kids, right? I don't have any kids, but I have nieces and nephews, and I knew they weren't learning all that they needed to learn in school, in the education system. So I said, I want to put together some some articles so that they can take it and do what they will with it. At least it would make me feel better, giving them maybe a leg up on others of real life experience that they could leverage. So I thought it was going to be 30, 40 pages, and I would just hand it off to a few family members. Um, it wasn't. After some amount of time, I was like, almost 300 pages, 35,000 words. And at that point, I figured, holy cow, this is a book. But I share that story because I think it's important because this book was not created for for the publisher, for, mass distribution. It was created with love to be able to give to my family. That's where it really generated from. But really, what I did was, I saw so many different ways that our freedoms were being stolen um, from us, either knowingly or unknowingly. And I would go into these conversations with friends and family members, and they would most often turn to the government, the politicians stealing our freedom. And I was like, yep, I can relate to that. There's definitely ways the government and the politicians steal our freedom. And so I wrote a chapter on how that happens with politics. Okay. But what people sometimes fail to provide or share in those conversations is how the education system also steals our freedoms. So I wrote and I'm not saying education is bad. I think you and I would both agree having an education, knowing how to do certain things, very important. I'm not saying an education is bad. We just have to be careful on how the education system is constructed and how it can steal our freedoms. So I wrote a chapter on the education system and how to be careful there. Next, chapter 3 was society. We ourselves, we willingly, how crazy this may sound, we willingly give up our freedoms, right? Instead of taking accountability for it as a society, right? A lot of values are learned by sitting down each day at the end of the day, having dinner together, talking to your kids, having that quiet time to use things that happened in the day as a teachable moment, right? To teach values, to teach a belief system, right? We ourselves as a society, as a familial unit, need to be doing that. Is that hard? Yes, I get it. It's hard to get everybody together at the end of the table. The kids, at the end of the day, around the table to have dinner. The kids are doing sports. The parents are, we're always on our devices, right? Our smartphones on our devices. Where work doesn't seem to stop these days. In the past, work ended when you left the office. You didn't have a cell phone, you didn't have a laptop. It's different today. Everybody has a cell phone. So, it's hard to get even the adults to focus at the end of the day. Right? It's hard, but as a society, there's things we need to do. It's not left to the politicians. It shouldn't be left to the education system. It's left to parents, it's left to the family to provide that education at the family level, at a society level. And I'll teach you a story. Growing up, I grew up in a city where there were many multifamilies. We lived in an apartment. There were many multifamilies around us, and my parents said to the neighbors, around us, if you see my kids doing something wrong, doing something bad, you have my approval to smack them upside the head, right? And you're laughing because you may have grown up in that same
I think
environment,
I've been
right?
smacked upside the head a few times by different parents.
Right. Right. And so and I'm not condoning child abuse or anything
No,
like that. I think folks we're wise
no,
enough to know what
this is tongue
I'm
in
not
cheek for
doing that.
sure. Yeah.
It's a thing of society policing ourselves and families policing ourselves, not inviting the government in to fix it for us, because when they do, we give away some of our freedoms when we do that. So I explained that in the book, how that happens, right? Also, another chapter, our fourth chapter, is on the economy, how the economy can steal our freedoms, financial and personal freedoms, right? Economies go through booms and busts, great growth and then a recession or a depression. And we need to understand those cycles. We need to understand that dynamic, because if we don't, how do we prepare for those good times and those bad times, like we were talking about? So the economy is a separate chapter. And then I also kept separately, and my publisher asked me why I kept this chapter separate. I wrote a fifth chapter on the monetary system because, again, it's not taught in the education system to any great degree, but the monetary system steals our freedoms, steals our wealth, because we operate on a fiat system, right? The US dollar, the Canadian dollar, it's not really backed by anything other than the full faith of the government is going to give you the denomination for the money you have in your hand. If you bring, a Canadian dollar, you can go to the bank and get a Canadian dollar's worth of currency for that, right? You can do that trade. But otherwise, with inflation, and I'm sure you've seen it in Canada, just like we've seen it in the United States, we've had very high inflation over the last 4 years since the start of COVID. And so
Yes.
that inflation with the fiat system has just taken away purchasing power through a lower value of that currency, right? Through inflation, we have less purchasing power. So that's described in the book. So I really set the tone in part one of the book to help folks understand those various ways our freedoms are being stolen, right? That education doesn't happen in the school system. So, and then most importantly, the second part of the book, part two, is where I start to describe, really, I give the a la carte package on how to protect yourself, whether it's personal freedoms or financial freedoms. I don't tell people like you must do these steps to be financially free or personally free. It's an a la carte. If this resonates with you, go do this. If this resonates with you, go do this, or go do two or three of those things. It's what relates to you, what you feel strongest about. I'll give the example of I know a couple of young people who are that financial freedom isn't really in their vocabulary, but personal freedom is a big thing in their vocabulary. So for them, having a garden where they can go plant their own fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, that's huge to them. That's something that they value greatly. So for them, and that's one thing in the book for like a personal freedom, is to know where your fresh fruits and vegetables come from. There's satisfaction in knowing that they haven't been contaminated with pesticides and different things. They're organic, they're good, and and then the other thing with the garden is being able to get out there, weed it, water it, right? To be able to get away from social media, get away from the news and the media, to be able to have some quiet time. Maybe you do that with your spouse, right? A great thing to build a relationship with your spouse, to have a stronger relationship, right?
Yeah, let me ask you something there, Tony. What is your first of all, let me even back up first. I know that so this is obviously we're on video here, but this is published on Spotify and Apple. So they won't be able to see this. Can you show the book again to the audience?
Sure, sure, sure.
All right. Turn it sideways for me. Okay. So that is significant, right? There's a lot of pages in that thing. That is not like a little 4 by 5, 20-page thing. I blew this up on Amazon. I'm a bestseller. Like that is a legitimate book.
Yes, sir.
Um, and I congratulate you on that because I also want to start writing. I think it's a you wrote it for the right reason. You didn't do it as a marketing ploy. You're offering to the listeners here to give it away for free. So I think that's awesome. But I'd like you to define freedom for me. What does that mean, right? You've been talking about it for a few minutes, but
Yeah.
what is the Tony's definition of freedom?
Well, and I love how you put it. What's Tony's definition of freedom? Because everybody's definition is probably different, right? We have to look at our experiences, our world around us, what freedom means. If you're in prison, freedom within the confines of a prison means certain things, right? If you're in a communist country, freedom will take on a different definition. If you're in Canada or the United States, right? So it's all relative to the individual, what they feel freedom is. So, but for me, freedom for me is to being able to do um, what I want, when I want, cause I want, right? I mean, I jump on this recording with you, Garrett, because I want to do this. I enjoy doing this. I love meeting other smart people who are looking to help others. That's what I want to do. If I didn't want to do this, I wouldn't be here, right? It's not
100%.
like
Yeah,
it's not like
likewise.
you're making money, I'm making money. We're not. We're doing this. This is out of the kindness of our heart to add value. So for me to for freedom for me is just that. If I want um if I want more time, say, in better climates, I need to say make more money, then that's part of my plan is say, okay, I got to go make money. Not make more money like you said earlier, just to make more money. No, there's a plan behind that because I need to make more money because I want to go buy a home or spend more time in a warmer climate, right? That's my motivation is I want to be in a warmer climate, not make more money just to make more money and to increase the bank account. That's not my motivation. My definition of freedom is to be able to do the things I want to do because I want to do them when I want to do them. That's me.
Yeah, no, and you used real estate to get there, and I think that's a great segue. I mean, you told us about the first C-class 4-unit property. Can you you said, I think 400 that you're at right now?
Yeah. I think we're
Tell us what
actually
the operation looks like today.
yeah. So I went from buying 4 unit buildings, 2 unit, like a duplex building, 5 unit building, small multifamilies for a number of years. And then I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I've done that and I can continue to do that, but I wanted to get into bigger deals. So I started doing some syndication. So I've done a couple of syndication deals, 90 some odd units. Uh, and then just recently we partnered with a family office out of New Jersey that allowed us to do an even larger deal down in just outside of Miami. It's 153 units apartment complex that we closed on earlier this year. So for me, it's part of the journey of continuously learning the business because I don't want to get stale. I don't want to, kind of be that one trick pony of all I can do is buy a duplex, buy a 10-unit building, something like that. I want to continually learn the business and also network and learn from others. I've had such a great ride the last few years learning from others. There's always more to learn on how to structure a deal, how to do the financing, how to do risk mitigation
Mhm,
on
mhm.
properties. So that's really been the road I've taken. And I'm not saying that's the right road for everybody. That's the road I've taken. But people have been successful in real estate in so many different ways. That's just one way.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, congratulations for branching out. I feel very much that I'm a one-trick pony because I bird everything that I had up to 43 buildings, 75 units at the time, just with my own money, you know? It was just sort of rinse and repeat, and didn't use anybody else's capital and probably should have, because I think had I started that capital journey earlier, it's all about those relationships, right? And it's like, hey, okay, we did this small thing. What can we do now? And now you're talking about syndications. I know that I've started to get involved in syndications actually down in Florida. We can talk about that off camera. But what was the catalyst of really trying to, let's talk about the syndication. I find that interesting. Putting together your first syndication. Can you walk us through it without like getting through any kind of confidentiality agreements?
Yeah, so, in terms of folks who are maybe looking to start their own syndication, um, it's one of the first important things to realize is, typically don't people don't do syndications on their own, right? It's a team. It's a team of, general partners who get together, and the second thing is each one of those general partners should bring something different to the team, okay? So, there may be one general partner, GP, that brings great underwriting skills, right? There's another one who may bring great deal flow. Like in one of ours, somebody was great at finding off market properties. Great. Uh, Another person may be great at raising capital, right? That doesn't mean the other GPs don't raise capital, right? I brought capital to the table in one of the deals, but it doesn't mean one wouldn't be really the force because of their networking, the size of their Rolodex, so to speak. So and then another one, like in my case, what I bring mostly to the table as far as a general partner is I bring great property management skills. I labeled my company Dirty Boots Capital. Dirty Boots because I get my boots dirty walking sites. I will literally fly out there. I will walk through them. I will climb up on the roof. Literally, I will climb up on the roof. I will look at that. I will look at the HVAC systems. Like, because I have a mechanical engineering degree and because I managed my own properties for so long, I know what to look for. I know,
Hmm.
when I can see rust on a condenser, there's certain things that will go through my head. And so for me, that's the skill, that's the value, right? We're talking about value. That's the value I bring to the team at that level. Now, I would challenge folks out there who want to start a syndication. What do they bring to the table as value? Maybe it's that underwriting, maybe it's that capital raise, maybe they're also great property managers, but you have to bring something, right? So that's the biggest thing with the syndication piece. Obviously, we need to go through the underwriting, make sure the numbers work, and that there's reserves. That's another thing. Making sure there's plenty of reserves, especially if there's a value add play to that property. Make sure you have plenty of reserves to be able to account for that. And if your reserves are starting to run low, be able to be flexible and not maybe do all those value add plans that you had, maybe pull back. But yeah, those are a couple of things I would share about syndications.
No, it's interesting. You talk about the property management piece because obviously I have a large property management company, and that's what I have told potential GP partners that I bring to the table. Because it is that boots on the ground, getting dirty when you need to, and just that breadth of experience. But let me ask you, I mean, being in property management and managing your own things and having that level of knowledge, when you get into a property that's not in your state, like you described flying to something, are you comfortable using a third party manager or do you not? Like how do you guys set these projects up?
Yeah, we definitely use a third party manager. But what it allows me primarily to do, because I'm the lead, so to speak, on that piece of it, what allows me to do is be able to talk in that property manager's language, right? Use the jargon they know. Be able to have a conversation. And I'll give you an example. I walked the property not too long ago. I went there on my own. I walked through it and I saw about 50% of the AC condensers needed to be replaced. I just visually saw that. And so as I'm talking to the property manager, I'm saying, "Hey, so what do you see needs to be done around here?" I didn't lead the witness, as I say. I didn't tell them what thoughts were going through my head, but As he was talking to me about things, he mentioned things like, seal coating the parking lot, which yes needed to be done. He also mentioned the AC condensers about 50% needed to be replaced. That gives me confidence that it is a credible property manager.
Yeah.
Okay, if I'm talking to that, it's like an interview, right? If that property manager does not say certain things to give me confidence, then chances are we'll either only have that property manager for a short time until we transition. And there's times sometimes where we keep somebody on because during until we close on a property. But that transition may happen quickly because they may not invoke enough confidence that they truly are aligned with our plan.
Yeah, no, you mentioned mechanical engineering. I didn't tell you this, but I have a background, a master's degree in molecular biology, which has everything to do with real estate, right? But in jest, but no, seriously, I think the audience who's listening, who are either in real estate, want to be in real estate from a very small capacity, we talked about freedom in the education system, but my advice to those listening is don't discount your experiences, whatever they may be, and lean into those as leverage for whatever deals you're doing, right? You could be a school teacher and you're really good at educating. Then you have a forum and you know how to speak to people. Maybe that's what you bring to the table. Maybe you're a contractor, so you're able to go in and manage the contracting piece, whatever that might be, or like us with the property management piece. I mean, you bring that mechanical engineering like specificity, and I bring to my partners, that process oriented SOP type mentality that scientists have. So, yeah, I think it's really important for people to lean into their past experiences.
I love that. I love that, Garrett. I'm so glad you brought that up because, sometimes folks don't feel aren't confident because they haven't done their first deal, or maybe they've just done a couple of deals. They're not confident. But I share with folks, I just I had a gentleman on my YouTube channel the other day, Dale Wills. He's built 1,500 single family homes. And so he's a big deal. He's, very successful in what he does. But you know what? If he came to my community, he wouldn't know 90% of what I know, right? Because he's new. So for folks who are looking to get into real estate or buy more real estate, I always share with them, look local because nobody knows your market better than you. If you're a parent, chances are you're involved in the school system, you're talking to the kids, you're hearing if they're going to be building another school, another elementary school or a bigger high school, right? That's a signal that I or Garrett will not know about because we just don't live in your community,
Right.
right?
Right.
You may be reading the paper and you may hear about, oh, Walmart is going to be opening up down the street. Right? Uh, Okay, that's information that I probably do not have that you have. That's an advantage that somebody has over me because they are operating in that local market. If they hear of a university coming that's going to be opening up a satellite campus, if they hear about a medical center that's going to be opening up, those are all very good signs that your community is growing. Those nurses, those adjunct professors, right? Those folks are going to need a place to live, a place to rent, and you being in that local community, you have firsthand knowledge about that before I ever will.
No, I think that's amazing advice because a lot of people, I mean, we all have what we view our challenges, right? And when you're trying to get into real estate or you're trying to expand, what are they? Let's spell them out. Money or lack thereof, right? Knowledge or lack thereof, network. And everybody who I've spoken to, you included, always they're not sure how to get started or not sure how to expand. And it's the same thing. See what you bring to the table because you have to partner with people if you don't have the requisite skills on both sides of that table. And what you're talking about there, Tony, is underwriting. You know your own market. You start networking. You meet somebody at a real estate meetup in a different city, and you say, "Hey, I haven't done a deal yet, but I know my market really well, and it's prime. Maybe there's low."
Absolutely. And a different example that I use is, for folks who maybe not have the down payment for a property, they may not have the capital for the down payment, but they may be great property managers, great people who can go in and do renovations, do the value add. Well, if you come across somebody that does have the capital through one of these real estate meetups, they may have the capital, but they may not know what you know in terms of being able to do renovations, being able to fix things, do electrical or plumbing or roofs or whatever it is. They may not feel comfortable doing that, but they'll bring the capital. So to be able to create a 50-50 partnership with folks or a joint venture with two or three other folks, right? To be able to do that and pool your skills together, that's incredibly valuable.
It's powerful. It's really powerful. And, for those folks who are, I want to kind of impress upon the point because there's two different types of real estate investors out there, right? Ones that want to invest in real estate and ones who want to be a real estate investor, right? And what we're talking about there, at least in my view, is the difference between being active and passive. So if you go to a real estate meetup, I mean, here's a classic example. I went and saw my doctor 2 days ago, and he's been heavily involved in real estate. We've had some conversations, but passively. He doesn't go and collect rents and do renovations and things like that. And he said to me, quote unquote, I like to partner with smart people who have their nose into real estate that know more than me. And then I want my money to work for me. So he's a passive real estate investor. So if you're somebody listening to this and you have a deal, you need to find those people who don't have that skill set. And there's a perfect marriage.
Great example. I love it, Garrett.
Yeah. All right. So walk me through now. So you said syndications, some other things, the family office. What's piquing your attention these days?
Um, so for me, a big piece of me is freedom, being able to have the most freedom and flexibility possible. So again, this is me personally. I'm very fortunate to live in a couple of places in the United States that benefit me. But I've just recently, a couple of months ago, have received my dual citizenship. I now have a second citizenship to Portugal, which basically opens up all of Europe for me.
Nice.
So I would like to do, for me personally, what's next would be able to do a real estate deal overseas, potentially in Portugal, potentially like an Airbnb, where I can generate some cash flow in that country, but also be able to use that property for myself, for vacations and things like that, and for family and whatnot. But that's me personally, right? That's the roadmap I've set out for myself. It just allows me to, with that mantra, do what I want to do when I want to do it because I want to do it. That's my definition of freedom. So I have a desire to be, in the north of the United States. I have a desire to be in the southern United States, and I have a desire to be in Europe. That just becomes a quality of life thing for me as I get older. So that's my next big thing.
Yeah, I actually have a phrase in my mind, and now I'm hearing my kids say, "Dad, that's a really bad pun." But I was going to say you're engineering your own freedom, and then there's the groan, right? Because okay, but no, sometimes these things come out of my mouth before they're even there. But no, seriously, like I think it's important to have those goals because why else are we here, right? Except to have those goals and make them big because when you reach your goals, as you did when you're 44, you don't want to be asking what's next.
Yeah.
You want to just kind of run over that as a speed bump and then keep going to the big goal, right?
Yeah, and wow, this is great. This is a great conversation because you get me so excited about things you're saying like goals, and this is such a perfect time of the year, right? We're coming into the end of the year, and typically this is a time where we start taking a look at goals for 2025. And if you haven't looked at them yet, that's okay. But if you've had goals for 2024, I encourage folks to go back to those 2024 goals and see if you've achieved them or not. And if you haven't, really ask yourself that question, why haven't I achieved that goal? And uh maybe it's not a goal anymore and it should come off the list. or
Yep.
maybe you've changed, or the business has changed, or your family has changed, right? But go back and find out why that goal didn't happen. Okay. Maybe it's just, maybe you got to put somebody else in front of it, right? Sometimes we assign goals and we kind of put ourselves as the point person to achieve it, but we're not the right one. All right. We're not the right one. We have to sometimes put somebody else. So, I encourage folks to go back, and it was an important thing at one point. Why wasn't it achieved? And maybe it's not important. But if it's still important, you really have to dissect that. And then for 2025, uh, you know, really start to identify. And I even say, before you identify your goals, understand your intentions. And by that, I mean, understand who you are and the big things you want to achieve. Like, for example, I use this example. For somebody who's a father, um, they may have an intention of being a great father, and that's a great intention. Absolutely, to be a great father. Wow, who wouldn't want a great father and be identified as a great father? That's a great intention. Now, map a goal to that. I want to spend more time with my kids. Okay, that's your goal, to spend more time with your kids. That's the goal. Now you put some actions to that goal. Once a week, I'm going to take my kids out for ice cream without fail, right? Once a week, I'm going to do that. Once a month, we're going to go on a road trip, a 2-day road trip or whatever it is, right? You identify those actions, but it all tallies up to being a great father. For me, my intention is to have the most freedom in my life possible. So all my goals stem from that, from having great freedom, right? So when I look back at it, I say, okay, I'm doing this. I'm not doing it just to do it and to check it off. I'm doing it because it's going to give me more freedom, right? And it's not just one thing. Like, some people can have, hey, I want to be a great father. I want more freedom in my life, and I want to be a better spouse. Those are all great intentions. Now map your goals to those intentions, because at the end of the day, if you're just working for goals to complete goals and they don't really map to anything big in your life that you want to do or be, do they really matter? Maybe they do.
You know, goal setting, I think by the time I think this podcast is probably going to be released around the new year, because we're just a few weeks away from Christmas, 2 weeks away from Christmas here. But what I like to give advice to folks is very similar to what you're saying, Tony, and I'm going to call it reverse engineering, and that's not a pun. Um, I like to pick a 5 or 10 year goal, then a 3 year goal, then a 1 year goal, and then a quarterly goal. And if you can break it down that way, like, how do you know how to get to your goal in 5 years? And how do you know you're on that track? Right? You could point the car in one direction in the complete blackness and then turn on the lights and realize that you're off by 50 degrees, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's super important to figure out where you want to be in 5 or 10 years. Let's say 5 years. I think 10 is pretty far out. Then what do I need to be there in 3 years? Am I on that goal? My 1 year goal. And then really seriously, I like to break it down into quarters, because then you can really choose what are the 3 to 5 things that I need to change in my business, my life, my whatever, my finances in the next quarter to get to my year goal. And then in quarter number two, quarter number three, you can evaluate, am I still on that path to that 1 year? What do I need to remove, change, whatever to get there? And then I promise you, you'll get to your 5 year goal.
That's a great way to look at it. I love it.
Yeah. So I like to give my guests the last word, and I prepped you with this. So I hope you. But I always ask the same question of every guest, and it doesn't matter where they're from, what walk of life, if they're in real estate or not. So, Tony Lopez, this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you?
Yeah. So how do I define success? I look at it as a high degree of happiness, right? I want to be happy. I want to be a good person to others. So success is a byproduct, so to speak, of that. So happiness is uh, you know Be in a content state no matter what life throws at you, right? You get laid off, but still being happy because you have second income flowing in from real estate. Okay, life threw that layoff at you, but you're still happy because you built up this real estate on the side, or you built up this second business to kick off cash flow on the right. That's happiness. And so if I can always be in that state of happiness, then I consider that a success, right? Um, so winning, what does a winning look like for me? I look at winning as, simply being productive, no matter what I'm doing, and that can be from a health perspective, improving my health, improving my financial picture, spiritual satisfaction there, right? Being productive there, being productive with relationships and growing relationships. Um, you know, Productivity in the sense of always moving forward and not backwards. That's what winning looks like to me, right? One of the things I share with folks just to help calibrate, I like a visual. I'm a very visual learner. So for me, I look at things in terms of, and you can look at success and winning in this way as well. I look at there being four levels of being. Okay. And we all go through some level of this, right? The first level being struggle. I think we all start off struggling in some way. Maybe as a young person, when we get out of school, we're going to find our first apartment and we're going to struggle to pay the rent, struggle to pay the bills, struggle with relationships because we're new at that stuff, struggle at a lot of different things. We all go through that level of struggle. And then at some point we get to that level of success where we have some happiness and some consistency and and we're good at what we do. We can pay our bills. We're good at our relationships. We have that success. The next level would be the level of significance, where we've already achieved such great success. We now have the opportunity, and I challenge folks on this because there's so many people who are successful. They think it stops there. No, go on to have a life of significance. Teach somebody, take on a role as being a mentor for others to help them achieve success, right? So in many ways, I feel like my life, I've struggled, I've had success, and now I'm in this realm of significance, going on these podcasts, inspiring others to do more for themselves and for their families, right? So I challenge folks to seek out that level of significance and not necessarily do things for yourself, but do things for others. And then the fourth level is the level of legacy. After you're gone from this earth, and what's left behind? Is there still something that's left behind that will provide goodness for the world? I mean, I look at my book. I wrote my book, and again, I wrote it from the standpoint of really love, providing goodness from my family. And I look at that as a piece of my legacy that after I'm gone from this earth will be passed down to others, other generations within my family and others out there, right? I don't need to be alive to be able to provide that legacy. My book will do it for me. So I challenge folks, as you work through these levels, just to try to seek that higher level of being, right? If you're at success, great. Kudos. Think about achieving a level of significance. And if you're at significance, think about achieving a level of legacy, right? After you're gone. So yeah, I know that's probably more than what you asked for, but I wanted to roll that in there to provide that visual framework that I think a lot of people will get value from.
Yeah, no, it's never more than I ask for. I mean, I've had hundreds of guests on and they all have different answers. And what you said there kind of resonated with me. A couple weeks ago, I had Brian Smith on the pod, the founder of Ugg Boots,
Oh, yep.
um, from Australia there. And most people might know the story that he sold out many, many years ago at 15 million, 17 million, I think, which is a lot of money back then. But the company he sold to ended up turning it into a $2 or $3 billion brand. And I asked him, any regrets? How do you feel about that? And when you said, struggle and your first point there, what he said is, we're not all born as adults, right? We're born as infants, we're born as babies, we struggle. And he said, for me to give my baby away, it was like giving your daughter away at, a wedding and hoping that, they're going to get married and have grandchildren and all these things. And he was quite happy to see it flourish and grow. So, yeah, what you said there, Tony, really resonated with me. It kind of reminded me of, we're not born as adults. We have to go through those struggles. And to Brian's point, look at his legacy, right? His legacy is Ugg boots and he still wears them to this day. He's very proud of the brand, even though he's not a part of it anymore.
Yeah, and he should be, and he should be. It's something he created. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. That's amazing tie back to that.
Yeah. All right. Well, great place to stop. This has been an amazing hour. Yeah, I mean, if you're ever wanted to come up here and venture into the cold, or I'm in Florida quite a bit, we'll definitely have to go for a coffee and meet each other because these virtual podcasts are great. But as we said in the green room, nothing beats personal. So
Absolutely. This was an absolute pleasure for me. I think a lot of value was shared here between us. And again, I just for your listeners, hit that subscribe button. Do Garrett some justice here. Show him some love, some appreciation. Hit that subscribe button. It's fantastic support. We thank you for that.
awesome. Okay, thanks, Tony. We'll see you around.
Thank you.